Good morning. This is Armando Gonzalez, Ryan Thomas, Ivory Carey, and Zachary Regan, and this is our analysis of Kenya.
In an overview, Kenya is a country located in the central western portion of the African continent, covering over 569,000 square kilometers of land and just over 11,000 square kilometers of water. Kenya is the 49th largest nation in the world geographically. Kenya became an independent state in 1963 after severing its ruling ties with the United Kingdom. Kenya's total population of 49.7 million is just shy of 50 million, with the majority of people living in the capital city. The capital of Kenya is Nairobi. With 2.7 million people living within its boundaries, Nairobi is by far the largest city in the country by nearly 2 million people. Some other populated cities include Mombasa, Nakuru, Eldoret, and Kisumu. Kenya's current political leader is its executive president, Uhuru Kenyatta. However, under an internationally brokered power-sharing agreement, a grand coalition government comprising the president and the new post-prime minister was established in March 2008 and ended in 2013. The last prime minister was Raila Odinga. With roughly 580,000 kilometers and nearly 50 million people, the per capita population of Kenya is about 88 per square kilometer. Kenya uses a political system quite similar to the one used in the US, with the leader being the executive president. Kenya's political ideology is one that follows a democratic republic society model. Just recently, political leaders were able to reconcile after fallout from a Supreme Court ruling that nullified the August 2017 election results. Supreme Court ruling caused a major split between citizens of the country and pitted their beliefs against each other.
So Kenya is comprised of a variety of different cultures, including 12 different ethnic groups. There are two official languages in Kenya, being English and Kiswahili or Swahili. However, there are also numerous indigenous languages present throughout the entire region. 81.1% of males are literate and 74.9% of females are literate. A lot of this being due to the gender structures that are present in Kenya. A lot of girls struggle to this day to have access to schools. And then English is taught in primary school and all the way through school with a very high standard set for both spoken and written. It's located in the East African time zone and does not observe daylight savings time. Currently, it has an exchange rate of 1 Kenyan shilling to 0.0097 US dollars with a very terrible exchange rate. There are a couple different quantitative measures of the economy that we need to look at. The first one being the central bank rate, or the interest rate at which a nation's bank tends to lend money to domestic banks in short-term loans, and this coming in at 9%. Next, the inflation rate is a quantitative measure of the rate at which the average price of a level of a basket of selected goods or services increases over time, and that is 4.95%. The savings rate, or a measurement of the amount of money that a person will deduct from their personal income in order to save or invest for the future or for retirement, is about 4.77% right now, with definite room for improvement. The lending rate, or the amount a bank charges on money that it lends, is currently 12.39%. Typically, the average Kenyan worker doesn't see much of a difference in their average work week from an American worker. The general working hours is 52 hours a week, with night shift actually being restricted to 60 hours. But most people only work about 45 hours a week. Typically, these hours are worked in 8-hour shifts, Monday through Friday, and a 5-hour shift on Saturdays, with Sundays having no work typically. Overtime is also present in the country. 1.5 times is pretty typical on weekdays, with 2 times on Sundays and public holidays. And there really wasn't any information about federally mandated break times. However, that's going to be entirely dependent on the actual company that an employee finds themselves working for.
Kenya is currently ranked 95th out of 140 countries in the world as far as economic competitiveness goes. Average and averaging a ranking of 96 from years 2007 to 2019, with the nation's highest competitive ranking being in 2007 when they reached 88th worldwide. When ranking a nation's economic competitiveness, several factors come into play. The main factors being human capital, or an individual's skills, knowledge, or experience that brings value to their nation; innovation, or the ability to create new processes, services, and goods; resiliency, or how can you maintain your economy during natural disasters like droughts, extreme weather, poor harvests, and market collapses; and industrial capabilities. What is your nation capable of producing, manufacturing, and creating? Kenya is the most developed nation in Eastern Africa, with massive improvements over their neighboring nations, such as 5 international airports, railways, industrial advancements, and emerging public education. Kenya has had a rich history of an agricultural economy, mainly revolving around coffee and tea since the 1980s. But after years of several poor harvests, massive droughts, and political uncertainty, low growth rates and severe inflation was caused in the early 1990s. This trying period for Kenya triggered their government to take steps to liberalize the economy, remove export licensing, price and foreign exchange controls, and reduce the public sector of state enterprises in 1993. These steps instigated inflation to drop and growth rates to increase in real gross domestic product, or GDP. The Kenyan government has committed itself to structural adjustments to avoid being susceptible to natural disasters by being so resilient on their agricultural assets in the early 2000s. This included the privatization of Kenya Commercial Bank, Telecom Kenya, and Kenya Railways, which are critical infrastructure for the nation. Along with enacting anti-corruption legislation, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has established a poverty reduction and growth facility in Kenya. Real growth in GDP has fluctuated due to things such as the global recession in 2008, but has remained on average at about 4 to 6% annually. Kenya has invested this growth into creating infrastructures for their people. This infrastructure creates the ability to continue to grow wealth in Kenya. Having a solid transportation, public institutions, reliable government, banks, entertainment, and capable internet networks allows Kenyans to become more independent as they grow their personal and national wealth. Kenya's current GDP in terms of purchasing power is 163.7 billion, with over a half of that coming from services rendered and the other half coming from 27.4% traditional agricultural and 16.9% from industrial products. However, the glaring issues moving forward with Kenya is the amount of poverty caused by unemployment, which World Factbook estimates to be at nearly 40%. This, of course, leads to Kenya being less competitive economically on a global scale. As Kenya is one of the more developed countries within all of sub-Saharan Africa, it still lacks an adequate infrastructure of true economic independence, and growth. Much like the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya is still dealing with a relatively large propensity for government corruption. The Kenyan economy, however, is still well in position to resume 5 to 6% growth rates in short terms, as economic indicators such as foreign exchange reserves, interest rates, current account deficits, remittances, and FDI are all in positive standing. If the Kenyan government remains committed to ending corruption, establishing infrastructure, and having a safe environment with their people, they can overcome these obstacles and sustain a steady economical growth.
So Kenya's economic situation. Kenya is currently the economic, financial, and transport hub of East Africa. They have a GDP growth average of over 5% for the last decade. Kenya has a growing entrepreneurial middle class and a steady growth. However, their economic development has been impaired by a weak government and corruption. Underemployment and underemployment are extremely high and could be near 40% of the total population. Agriculture remains the backbone of the Kenyan economy, contributing to 1/3 of the gross domestic product. 75% of Kenya's population of roughly 48.5 million works in the agricultural sector, including livestock and farming activities. Over 75% of agricultural output is from small-scale, rain-fed farming or livestock production. Tourism also holds a significant place in Kenya's economy. Kenya has consistently been a target of terrorist activity and has struggled with instability along its northeastern borders. The terrorist attacks during 2013 and 2015 affected the tourism industry severely, but this sector has rebounded strongly in 2016, 2017, and continues growing. Inadequate infrastructure continues to impede Kenya's efforts to improve its annual growth so that it can address its poverty and unemployment issues. International financial institutions and donors remain important to Kenya's growth and government. The Kenyatta administration has been successful in courting external investment for their infrastructure development. The first phase of a Chinese financed and constructed standard gauge railway connecting Mombasa and Nairobi opened up in May 2017. Kenya's economy is well placed to resume its decade-long 5% to 6% growth rate. In his second term, President Kenyatta has pledged to make economic growth and development a centerpiece of his second administration, focusing on his Big Four initiatives of universal healthcare, food security, affordable housing, and expansion manufacturing. Moving over to Kenya's healthcare. The current health expenditure in Kenya is 5.2%, describes the share of spending on health in each country relative to the size of its economy. CHC shows the importance of the health sector in the economy and indicates the priority given to the health in monetary terms. They have a physician density entry of 0.2 physicians per 1,000 population, which provides a number of medical doctor, physicians, including generalists and specialists, and medical practitioners per 1,000 of the population. The hospital bed density of 1.4% per 1,000 population provides the number of hospital beds per 1,000 people. The country has an estimated 1.6 million people living with AIDS. This is a 2018 number. This is an estimate of all people, adults and children alive at year end with HIV infection, ranking 5th in the world. Kenya has an adult prevalence rate of 4.7 of adults aged 15 to 49 living with HIV, ranking 12th in the world. And 25 people have AIDS-related deaths in 2018, including adults and children, ranking 6th in the world. Kenya has an adult prevalence obesity rate of 71.1%. The obesity is defined as an adult having a body mass index greater to or equal to 30 kilos per meter square. 11.2% of children under the age of 5 are considered underweight. This statistic is usually an indicator of the nutritional status of a community. Usually, children who suffer from growth retardation as a result of poor diets and or recurring infections tend to have a greater risk of suffering illness and death. The Kenyan Parliament must get fully behind the President's Universal Health Coverage Program. It must grant the legislative and budgetary support that it needs so they can overcome their health challenges. In the past 5 years, there has been a dramatic drop of 40% in the death rates resulting from AIDS worldwide, and Kenya is a leader in that global trend. The rate of new HIV infections has been cut by 51% from 100,000 to 50,000 Kenyans, thanks to an ambitious plan adopted in 2014 to fight AIDS. All African countries must follow Kenya's lead in making diagnostic tests and consultations both free of fees and of shame. Initiatives like Liverpool BCT Health, a local NGO providing HIV prevention, testing, and care and treatment services, deserve much of this credit.
This concludes our presentation on the analysis of Kenya. If you have any questions about any of the information that was presented, please refer to our references slides, and have a great afternoon.